Welcome back to another episode of the Positively You podcast. I'm your host, Jessie, and today's episode is all about choosing presence over balance. I know balance is a big thing on our mind right now as we're finishing up the craziness of May and heading into summer. So this episode is very, very timely. My guest is the wonderful Jenn Trepeck, and we dive deep into the idea that rather than trying to juggle a million things at once, we can find more peace and fulfillment by being fully present in whatever we're doing. Jenn and I explore the concept of using the metaphor of a Venn diagram, imagining all of the different circles in your life, work, family, personal, kids, all coming together into one. And what if the time that you spend at the gym actually supports the time you spend with your kids? And following a passion or building a side hustle enhances everything you're doing for your family? That all of the many ways you're being pulled are all interconnected, and how we can be present in those instead of feeling frazzled. We talk about the importance of self-care and how taking care of ourselves can show those around us what's possible in life. It's not just about balance, it's about presence. Jenn shares practical tips like the power of writing things down to clear our mental space and focusing on one thing at a time instead of trying to multitask. We also discuss the power of time blocking and scheduling tasks realistically. Guilty of that sometimes. Taking into consideration your energy levels and your daily routines. And sometimes pairing tasks with chores you don't enjoy can make a huge difference, like calling a friend while you're folding laundry, one of my favorite things to do. So this episode is totally packed with lots of insights and lots of actionable tips because, I always like to leave you with something you can actually take action on after you listen to help you feel less overwhelmed and more present. So if you're ready to maybe stop feeling frazzled and start feeling fully engaged, especially as we are heading into summer, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. All right, everybody. I am so excited to welcome Jenn Trepeck to the podcast. She is the host of the podcast Salad with a Side of Fries. And when I tell you I binged a bunch of episodes, I loved her podcast so much. It's now on rotation for me. So if you need another one besides this one to add, there's a good recommendation for you. But Jenn, I am so excited to talk to you about our topic that we're going to do today because it could not be more timely. But before we jump in, say hello. Let's introduce yourself and hear who you are from you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Jessie, for having me. I'm super excited for our chat. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenn Trepeck. As Jessie mentioned, my podcast is Salad with a Side of Fries. I am a health coach. I came to all this wellness stuff through my own saga of health and weight management and trying to fill that all out. I use the word saga because I feel like journey doesn't do it justice. There was drama,
I like
it was
saga. Yes.
yeah. It was a saga. And even when I learned about the curriculum that I've based my practice on, I was like, oh no. I don't need your thing. Right. I thought I had all the answers. Spoiler. Didn't. Didn't have all the answers, and sort of worlds collided for me because I had my health weight management saga. And then I was also looking for something to do outside of my full-time job. I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I just knew that I couldn't work for somebody else for the rest of my life. And so I was looking for things to do. And then these two things came together. I became a health coach. I really felt like what I learned that changed my life was the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us.
Yep.
And I felt like everybody deserves this. And then why isn't this what we learned? And where did all of those things come from? And so as an insatiable student, anytime I had things come up or my clients did, I went learning. I read every book I could get my hands on. I went to every seminar and workshop and training and continuing education course and all of these things to really understand not just why things were happening, but also how do we shift that, right? And so I work with clients, I think my youngest client was 11 and my oldest is, in her 80s. So it really, runs
It's
the
a big
gamut.
range. Yeah.
Right. But the point being, I think number one, this is human and it's never too early and it's never too late to figure this stuff out. And I think there's an assumption that we should, and I hate the word should, right? There's this assumption that we should know how to do these things, but like no one ever taught us these things. So how would we be able to figure that out? And so all of that to say, everything I do is about changing the state of healthcare and helping people reclaim control of their health and their lives.
Mm, I love that. And it speaks so much to what your podcast is about, your message and your mission, and what mine is as well. And if you're listening to this, you're right in there of it's never too late to learn. It's never too late to try, to pivot, to implement some different things into your life. So I love firstly that that is your whole philosophy of it's never too late. Like we can always learn, we can always grow, we can always try something new, and that you just devoured all of this information to get to that point. I love that story and that saga so much
Yeah.
that you said. So obviously there's a ton of different avenues that we can go down here with this and with your expertise. But something that I wanted to talk about that seems to be the forefront of everyone's mind right now is balance or the lack thereof of balance. And balance is a huge part of our mental health and our mindset, and everything is a huge part of our health and how we take care of ourselves and how we show up in the world. And I know right now for me, I've joked a lot on social media with my friends that it's May 7th. It's just as busy as December, if not
Yep.
worse. It just feels crazy. But let's be honest, every month is like that, right? We say so often, like when things slow down, we'll do this. When this slows down.
Totally.
And you have this visual that I kind of want to dive into about the Venn diagram of your life and
Yes.
taking that and kind of making it a singular circle because our life is just singular, right? So
Right.
let's break that down. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. There's all these things that we put on a shelf and we're like, oh, yeah, when I
Mhm.
will. Right. And that when might be when the kids are at camp, when I'm not traveling so much, right?
Yeah,
When I have that body, I will, you know, clean out the closet, write the book, do the thing, right? Like actually build this business that I've been talking about. Whatever. We have this like, if or when,
yep,
then I will. And a lot of times we think of like the Venn diagram thing is like you have one circle of the things that you know, like your health stuff. And then you have a circle of the things for the kids, and then the things for the house, and the things for your family, because none of us only have one set of responsibilities,
yep.
right? We have 8 million circles, and somewhere in the middle, they all overlap. And it's just little old us with like an octopus of arms all being pulled like Stretch Armstrong in a million directions. By the way, that might be a
Absolutely.
very weird reference as I'm saying Stretch Arms. Do they even still make that toy?
I have no idea, but I am old enough to know the reference.
Okay.
So
Okay,
you're
great.
in good company.
Okay, good. Right? Like we feel like somewhere in the middle, all these circles overlap and it's us pulled in a million directions.
Uh-huh.
And I think balance is a 4-letter word. Like
I agree.
it doesn't exist.
Yep. And here's what I'm going to give a spoiler. You wrote something, balance doesn't exist. And if you're like, wait, what? Because I've been going for this thing that I really wanted and you're telling me it doesn't exist, but I like what you replaced it with instead of balance,
Yeah.
which is presence.
Yes.
Oh,
So before we get to that,
yes. Sorry, I'm
let's
jumping
turn.
ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. It's perfect. So in the middle of this Venn diagram is us, pulled in
Mhm.
a million directions. Like, what if we take our hands and like do this, right? Like, take your hands and push all those circles together so it's just one.
Yeah.
And then consider the time that you spend at the gym supports the time that you spend with your kids. And the time that you spend following a passion or building a side hustle or doing this other thing actually supports everything you're doing for your kids and your family and building the life that you want to build, right? Like we think they're all separate and they're not. It's all a part of this bigger picture, right?
Mm,
So
yes.
when we take the time to take care of ourselves, when we take the time to follow a passion, it demonstrates to the people around us what's possible in life and that there is more to life than, their math homework, right? And like there's tremendous value in that, I think. So if we can start to look at things as what I'm doing over here actually supports what I'm doing over there, then even just almost instantly, we're a little relieved of some of that stretching.
Absolutely. I was going to say, even just the visual I had from before all of it and just visualizing that, I feel like I'm breathing easier, right? Nothing in my life actually
Yeah.
changed in this moment. It's just me visualizing that. And I actually do feel better.
Yeah. It's it's less overwhelming. Like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, wait, I can breathe. It is okay to do these other things, right? Even if it means that in that moment, I'm not doing that thing.
Yeah.
And I say this with all the humility in the world because I can multitask with the best of them. But when
Yep.
we multitask, we are technically not doing any of those things at our best,
Hmm.
which is why I say, what if instead of balance, our objective is presence?
Yeah.
So when you're at the gym, and I say the gym, but like you could be walking, right? When you're doing something for your health, just do that thing.
Yeah. Which
And
if
when you're
you
with your
are,
kids, yeah,
yeah, if you are a multitasker, like if this is hard, that can be a huge shift, right? To just do
huge.
the
And
thing.
it's not easy, right?
No.
So what that means for me, because again, I'm a multitasker. I think this is some version of ADD, to be honest.
Hmm.
But like I can do my workout, or go for a walk and listen to a podcast and I'm fine. But I struggle with going for a walk and not having something else going on, right? So also everything in life is an evolution. So,
Yes.
right? But that doesn't mean that listening to the podcast while we walk isn't part of being on our walk, right? That might be part of our walk. What I mean is while we're on our walk, let's not answer the email.
Yes.
And again, I say this with humility and self compassion because I'm working on it too, right? But we don't have to answer that email that moment.
Right.
And so, by the same token, when we are with our kids hanging out, let's actually just be with our kids and hanging out
Hmm.
and not answering the email,
Yeah. Or even the
right?
other things
Yeah,
with when I'm sitting, with my kids and all of a sudden I notice that something's out of place. And so then my mind automatically goes to, oh, I need to clean up that thing. Oh, which then means I need to do this, which then means, and suddenly I'm on this whole
right.
spiral too, right? Of I'm still physically sitting there with my kids, but my mind has left and I am in 10 different places planning 10 different things. And that's the
Exactly.
tricky part too, right?
So, for those moments, you got to figure out your own system. I'm a
Hmm.
big fan of a post it.
Okay.
Okay. Grab a post it, write it down. And maybe you're writing down all four things that need to happen in order to clean up the one thing, right? But put all four of those things on the post it and then let's be back.
Yeah, I like that. And that might seem almost like you've left, right? Because in my head, I'm still sitting here with the kids. I haven't left, but everything's going swirling around in my mind. So I'm not present. And it might seem like you're like, okay, but now I'm getting out of it. I'm writing something down on a post-it. So I have left my kids. But you haven't. It's kind of
Right.
it's a weird shift that you have to get to be like, no, take it out of your mental, put it down on physical, and then you can come back to being present. And it really is that quick.
Right. Keeping a running to do list in our heads actually depletes our willpower.
Mm,
It actually depletes our focus. It eats up way more brain space than we realize.
yeah.
So in my health coaching world, inevitably we talk about tracking. right? Writing things down.
Yes.
And I was actually being interviewed on this guy's podcast, and he was like, well, a lot of people don't need to do it. And I was like, here's the thing. It's not that they're not doing it or don't need to. It's that they're doing it in their head,
Yeah.
especially if you're focused on a health related goal.
Uh-huh.
It's not that you don't need to. It's not that that's extra, right? Or whatever. And it's not that you're not doing it. You are doing it. You're doing it mentally
Mm-hmm.
in a way that actually takes up a lot more brain capacity than it needs to. Because if it's on a piece of paper, I don't have to remember it.
Exactly.
So it's the same idea here where it's on the piece of paper. The piece of paper will remind us later, and then we can be back to doing the activity or whatever it is that we were doing, where we're just practicing being there.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting thing that starts to happen with the people around you when wherever we are, we're just there.
Mm-hmm.
And when the things come up that we think about of, oh, I need to do that, either write it down somewhere and then later I can put it in a calendar, block out some time, whatever it is. Or sometimes, right, we can sort of not that like, okay, I'll do that later. And by the way, miracle of miracles, it actually does come back. Like we do
True.
remember, you know. Um, but the idea of just being like, what we do for one thing doesn't take away from the other unless we're trying to do those things at the exact same time. So consider, right, the time that you spend that might feel like something really selfish, right? It might be reading a book when there's a whole to-do list of things, right, that might need your attention. But by reading the book, you can then show up and do the to-do list or drive carpool or whatever it is and not be cranky, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's do that.
Yeah.
And I think then too, people find time for the things that they feel like there's never time for when we
Mm-hmm.
start to approach it this way.
Yeah, I think so too. It reminds me of the phrase and versus or, right?
Yes.
Once we can do all of this, it becomes an and thing and not an or thing. And I think about the people who I do look at that seem like they're doing it all and they're doing it all well and they feel really, really balanced, for lack of better word. But I'm kind of thinking about the characteristics of those people, and something that they have is when they are in that thing, they are present in that thing. And that feels like why they're managing it all so well is because they don't feel frazzled because they're not going 10 different ways when you're having that interaction with them. Right? When I'm with
Right.
the mom who I know also runs a business and also has all the kids and also somehow is a baker or whatever, all the things, right? When you look at
Yeah.
super mom, and you're talking to her and you're like, man, she's got it all together. And she was really present here because she was present. And I think that is a big clue about how you can have and how you can incorporate all of it is really it's counterintuitive to what we think, right? Is how, well, no, we gotta be 10 steps ahead. We've got to be thinking about all the things all at once so that I don't fall behind, right? But no, it's in letting the things go that you're not currently doing and in being balanced. And as I'm kind of reviewing those people who are not on that pedestal that I've put them on, but that I see kind of doing this well, that is a quality that I think is the thing that I haven't been able to name, but I'm naming it.
Yeah. And I think we also have this idea that like everybody else has it figured out. Like
Yeah.
one of the things that somebody asked me on a podcast recently, like what's something you used to believe to be true that you no longer believe? And I said that people know what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Nope.
Everybody is making it up all the time. And I think too, like as we recognize that, now somebody might be operating from a slightly different set of facts. Like they may have a different experience that then
Mhm.
lends itself to a different perspective and therefore make a different choice, right? And try something different. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they know what they're doing.
Right.
And I would be willing to bet good money that even the people that you have put on that pedestal have moments of feeling frazzled.
Oh, 100%.
right? The difference is figuring out what needs to happen in our day and our week to minimize how often that happens and how long it lasts.
Yeah. And that's where I wanted to go next with you, right? Because this mindset piece is all lovely, right? Like, let's shift, let's
Action.
pretend, like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's visualize this Venn diagram turning into a single thing. Like, that's all great and lovely. And we can leave here feeling good. But then real life is going to smack us in the face. And we need actual action steps of what to take. So, how we put this into action and how we tangibly go, right? You're talking about how do we minimize this through our week? So, how do we minimize that through our week?
The Post-it is a big one so that we're not trying to keep everything in our heads and we're not distracted by the things that we notice when we're doing whatever the thing is that we're doing in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? So that's number one. Time blocking a calendar has been a savior for me. So what that means is I can move things around. Like nothing
Hmm.
is that set in stone, but things are in there.
Yeah.
And when I think of a task that needs to be done, I'm actually using to-do lists far less, and I
Hmm.
am putting it in my calendar for a chunk of time and a realistic chunk of time.
Yes,
So, right?
that is key.
Cleaning out a closet is not a 20-minute endeavor.
Right.
Full stop. Right? Um, so that's so putting those things into the calendar so that there's a time where that's the plan and that is what I'm supposed to be focused on in that moment.
Right. Right.
Right?
And that's why I like time blocking too, because it's almost like, take into account what your day looks like. Take into account when your kids are home and when you've got your own energy levels. Some of us are really productive first thing in the morning. Some of us are night owls
Right.
where you get that burst of energy. So knowing that about yourself too and about your schedule those things in, right? So I'm not going to put cleaning out the closet as an example at 3:30 when I know my kids are getting home. Like that's a terrible time. So it's being aware of your life as a whole when you're time blocking too is I think a good tip.
Yeah. Yeah. And so some of the other things that I've also started to do is so my workout most days of the week is at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
I now put a hold in my calendar for 10 to 10:15 so that I'm actually not rushing out of that.
Yeah.
So that I have a little bit of a buffer, right? And by the way, those reminders are as much to myself as to somebody who has access to my Calendly and my book some time, right?
Mhm.
So maybe there's an hour a day that is just a hold for the stuff that comes up.
Yeah. I think that's important, scheduling in either that hold or scheduling in that white space where it's you've got nothing.
Right. Now we are famous for giving that white space away,
Oh, yes.
right? So I find it easier to put 20 minutes that says meditate in the calendar versus having a chunk of white space.
Okay.
Like if my calendar has a walk, I'm more likely to go on the walk than if my calendar has a wide open couple hours and then I go, what should I do? I have a
Mm,
couple hours,
yep.
right? So everybody is different in this. You're probably going to play around with it to figure out what works best for you. And little pro tip, what works best for you today may not work tomorrow.
It's
Doesn't
true.
mean you're broken. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's
It's
called
very true.
human.
Yep.
And
I was
we
going to
just
say
try something else.
I was going to say the other word that comes to mind that keeps popping up with me with this whole process is grace. Giving yourself grace to explore and to try. It kind of comes back to the very beginning when you talked about, wanting to learn things and that we're never stuck and we always get to keep going. That goes along perfectly with this of saying you're not stuck just because one system has worked for you before and it obviously isn't right now because you feel like you're drowning and everything is chaos. That coming at it of not something's broken and how do I fix it and I'm so overwhelmed, but coming at it more of, okay, like what's something new I can try that might work better? And if it works better, great, you found it. And if it doesn't, let's tweak it and try again. And I think so often we want to just come at these problems and this overwhelm with a prescription and being able to fix it and
Yep.
implement it right away. And if it doesn't, something's wrong with us and we're just never going to be an organized person. We're just a hot mess forever. And that's a silly story you're telling yourself. So if you're telling yourself that story, it can go away and
Right.
no.
Right. And the other thing that I've found over time too is that sometimes, like, I found this a lot when I was building my health coaching practice as a side hustle, where I would put that chunk of time in my calendar of like, okay, I'm going to focus on my business at that time. And then the time would come and be like, but what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right? Like what do I actually need to do? Like I know I have this moment and like I can't even think of what like okay, I should probably call, but you know what I mean? It's like then I'm sitting in the moment going, what? Right? So, one of the things that I would do is again, my trusty post-it, as I would think of things that I needed to do for my business, I'd write it on a post-it. And then when I left the office that day, I'd stick that post-it in my coat pocket. So from there, now I'm walking from the office to go work out. I put my hands in my pockets and I pick up the post-it and it says, do this. Oh, I could actually make that phone call right now. And I would end up using my commute time to tackle a lot of those things that I wanted or needed to do for my business.
Yeah.
And so we can almost find the time if we build in those things that remind us of the things that we wanted to do, where, you know, again, I am fully aware that that is the opposite of what I was saying before of like just be present, right?
Yeah.
but but I can drive in the car and make a phone call and be present for that phone call and still drive safely.
Yeah. I think there are certain tasks that are you're able to multitask a little bit better, right?
Yes.
There's like the
Right.
low impact tasks or whatever. Like when I'm
Right.
folding laundry, I don't necessarily need to be incredibly present with this laundry. That's also a time where I
Right.
can, make a phone call or Marco Polo someone or listen to a podcast. So there are those things
Right.
where we're not saying like, oh, you're contradicting yourself
Right.
because you're not being present here. There are those certain items where you don't have to be like 100% and where you can do the double things and you're definitely present.
And I will say, sometimes those are the things that help me do the things.
Right.
So if I can say, all right, I have literally before we started recording, I had laundry drying like all over my apartment. And so, you know, in the last day since that was dry, right, where I could have picked it all up, sometimes I'll build it into the activity of like, great, I'm going to do that while I talk to this person.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to call that friend who I haven't talked to or whatever it is. Right. And then it turns this chore into a time that maybe fed my soul a little bit because I got to catch up with a friend that I hadn't talked to in a long time.
Yeah.
So we can pick those moments and the things that allow us to seemingly do it all.
Right. Right. And I think that's actually, like you said, it gave something that you didn't want to do some more life to it. So when we are feeling pulled in a thousand different directions, we're feeling burnt out. I think that's actually a really good tip of what can I pair this with? For me, May is filled with, spring sports. My kids are in different things.
Yep.
I feel like from 3:30 in the afternoon until 8 o'clock at night, I'm a taxi driver. So is that a time that I can use to listen to an audiobook or a time I can use to connect with friends? Or if I'm sitting somewhere, do I have a book I want to read if I've got, 30 minutes to just hang out in the car while I'm in between things? Instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm just in my car all day and making it feel like this dreaded activity that I don't want to do, what can I do to elevate those experiences instead? And while it might seem like I'm just adding more to my list and my plate, it's putting those things in that, like you said, takes a task that's life draining and makes it more life giving.
Yeah. Or the things that we feel like we never have time for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I have a lot of my clients, all of those if then things that we started
Yeah.
with, right? Or the things that we wish we had time in the day, like reading a book, like calling that friend, like um taking a bath, Or what are all of those things that you feel like sound amazing that you never have time to do? Put those things on a list, on a Post-it, so that when the kids are at a sleepover and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I have a found hour or a found 5 hours." We can go to that list of the things that we feel like we never have time to do.
Yeah.
Be like, "Wait a minute. I can take a bath and clean up the kitchen and feel like a human and read a book."
Yeah. And I think it's important to have that list because, like you said, so often that white space comes and we panic and we don't know what to do with ourselves. And so I think a lot of times we think of a brain dump and we think of writing down all the things as all the things we have to do. But I like having that list of things that I want to do. So if something pops in your head or you see someone else doing something, you're like, oh, I have never have time for that. Write that thing down because the time eventually will open up, right? And you don't want that to go to waste. So I love having that list of not only all of the to-dos that you have to do, but also the like want to do's so that you
Yeah.
don't waste that white space. I think that's a really good tip.
Consider too, I actually had this conversation with a client on Sunday. A lot of times we can get to the end of the day. And this goes back to your question of how do we build things in so that this overwhelm happens less often and for shorter periods of time when it does happen, right? This client in particular will get to the end of the day and he just feels spent,
Yeah.
and he's like, I got nothing left. And it's like, because we haven't built times into the day to recharge. And he's a big reader of the news.
Okay.
So when he has 10 minutes, he picks up something news related and reads it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said with love, it's contributing to that spent feeling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The more noise, the more input, even if it's not noise, that's probably a poor choice of words, right? But the more input, the more overwhelm. Our brains and our bodies need a minute. So if we're getting to the end of the day and we're feeling spent, we want to look at how to build some spots into the day to minimize the input, to give us a chance to recharge and be ready for the next thing so that there is some, power in the battery when we might want it or need it later.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good tip. And one thing that I've been trying to do is be more mindful and present for lunch because lunch is just one of those things like, hurry quick, I got to eat because I have to survive, but I've got 10,000 other things to do. And so you just rush through it. And something that I've tried to start doing, and me and my husband both work from home, is lately we've been trying to schedule our lunch breaks together. Like, look at our calendars, be like, when do you have a break? When do I have a break? Great, let's meet up for lunch, which literally means walking down the stairs to the kitchen together.
Yep.
And now that the weather's nice, we've been having lunch outside. And I cannot tell you how much that has helped with the end of day burnout to be able to have that break where we step away, we leave our phones inside, we go outside and have a little 20-minute, half-hour lunch with each other. Magical. And it's literally the easiest thing in the world.
Right. But you made it happen. You prioritized it, you
Uh huh.
figure it out. And it's not so easy sometimes.
No,
Right. But a lot of times it becomes hard or harder because we think it requires more time than it does.
absolutely.
Or we think that it doesn't count unless,
Right. Unless we
right?
actually leave the house, we go out to lunch, yes, we want to make things way more complicated.
Right? It doesn't count. The workout doesn't count unless it's long enough or intense enough. Like 10-minute walk is actually incredibly powerful, right? 3 deep breaths, magical and scientifically proven, not just magical, right? So
True.
it doesn't have to take tons of time. And part of building that up and having this idea in our head that it's more goes back to our own sort of resistance to making a change and
Hmm.
figuring it out, and a little bit of discomfort. Because when we're uncomfortable, when we're tired, when we have low blood sugar, our body's default is to maintain the status quo.
Yes.
So if you end up in those moments where you live in the land of shoulds, right? You're watching TV and going, I should be doing this right now, right? Add it to your calendar. put the time in the calendar that you're watching TV.
Yeah.
That was the assignment for that time, right? Block the 10 minutes for the walk at that time. This is my assignment right now, and we can make it part of the day,
Yeah.
right? By having your husband to do lunch with, not only is it incredibly powerful for longevity to have that connection, right? And the fresh air and and the break, but it forces us, that accountability forces us to take the time.
Yes.
So I even the other day with a friend had a co-working session. We both had things that we needed to do. We were both procrastinating, right? We jumped on Zoom and it was like, okay, moral support, we're going to do this right now.
Yep.
You know, Uh, Finding the tools, finding the things that make it easy is the key to all of it because nobody wins for making this the hardest. Whatever
Absolutely.
this is for you. So play with it, build those things into the day that allow you to have a little downtime, that allow you to then be present and not feel so depleted and drained in those moments when you want to show up as the best version of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that all of that is so great and gives us really good starting points. Number one is I'm going to go buy myself a new pack of Post-its because I want, get some fun colors, like make it fun, or get a notebook. I have a notebook that I carry around, or even the notes app on your phone, like whatever
Yep.
you can to kind of brain dump. I would say that's like one of the number one takeaways from today. If you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if balance feels super out of reach because it doesn't exist technically, but brain dump all of the things out of you so that you can get present in your life today and then schedule in some kind of white space either today as you're listening to this or sometime this week, a white space with an intention that you're actually filling it with something. I
Yeah.
would say that would be my like takeaways from what you've said.
Yeah.
What would
I
be
love it.
your action step if you're listening to this where you're like, this is the one thing if you're listening that you're going to take away?
Um, well, one of the I want to comment on what you said is brain dump, but organized.
Mm,
So the things that you feel like you never have time to do are on a different list than the things that are like, no, I have a deadline for these things,
yes.
right? Versus the things that are like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if,
Yeah.
right? So we have sort of those different lists. Um, my takeaway for someone is in that moment where you recognize the conversation with you're having with yourself of I'm doing this, but I should be doing that. Or you're feeling pulled and exhausted, right? I want you to just pause, recognize that that's what's happening. All I can do is all I can do, and all I can do is enough. This is where I am right now. The things that are also on that list, I'm going to put a little hour in my calendar or something, right? At another time for it to happen. That's
Yeah.
it, right? You don't have to uproot the apple cart. If what we do from this conversation is just recognize those moments when we're feeling like we're at the center of that Venn diagram, fine. Just start to take note of the moments where you're feeling like you're pulled in a million directions and just pause. Be like, okay, presence over balance. All I can do is what I can do.
I love that. That's a really good saying, little mantra for yourself. All I can do is all I can do. And it is enough. It's fine for right now. Just even that awareness. I mean, that is the easiest, not the easiest, but the simplest step to take that little baby step
Yeah.
forward into feeling more balanced and more in control is that awareness of just recognizing what you're feeling. So I love that that was your tip and your takeaway. So if you are like, Jen, I need way more from you because this was gold, where is the best place to find and kind of connect with you and get more of what you're offering?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel like we could keep talking forever.
We could.
Yeah. So my podcast is Salad with a Side of Fries. All social media, I am at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. Please, like my favorite thing in the world is hearing from you. So send a message. I want to hear like what resonated with you. What questions do you have? What are you like? Nope, I disagree. Like I want to hear all of it. You can get my little freebie. It's not what to eat, it's how to eat.
Mm,
Um, so that's available for you. And then that also gets you into my little ecosystem and we can stay in touch.
Awesome. I love it. I made it super easy for you guys. All of her links that she mentioned are right there in the description. So you can grab those. And Jenn, I think maybe we need to have another conversation on what not to eat or how to eat or all the things, because I could talk to you for a long, long time. So thank you for making time for us today.
Would love it. Thank you, Jessie. Appreciate it. This has been great.
Thank you for hanging out with me again today. I'm so glad you pressed play. If you want to take a quick second to share this episode with someone you think would love it too, that would be amazing. If you're loving the show, make sure you go and leave a review on iTunes. Reviews are like magic for podcasts, and your review will help get this show into the ears of more amazing women just like you. And come find me over on Instagram. I'm there at positively.jessie, and I cannot wait to hang out with you some more. So until next time, have an amazing week.